subscribe button right now because today we are getting into something that is going to shake you to your core. I am not playing with y'all. I am not clickbaiting you. What I am about to share with you today is something that has been sitting in the dark for years, and it just came to the light, and the streets are not ready. We are talking about King Von, Dayvon Bennett, the storyteller from O'Block, the voice that made you feel like you were right there on the block with him. Gone too soon, taken from us on November 6th, 2020. But today we are finding out that before he left this earth, King Von left something behind. Something personal. Something that was never supposed to go public. Something meant for one person and one person only, his son, Dayvon Jr. Now allegedly, and listen to me carefully, allegedly there is a message. A recorded message. And the people who have supposedly heard it are saying that what Von said in that message will break you down. Will make you question everything you thought you knew about his final days. The family is divided. The blogs are going crazy. Fans are in their feelings. And we are about to break down every single detail right here, right now. Stay right there. Alright y'all, let's get into it. And I need y'all to understand something before we even start. This is not just some gossip. This is not just some random blog talk. This is about a father. A young father who knew the life he was living was dangerous, who knew every single day could be his last, and who allegedly made sure that before anything happened to him, his son would have something to hold on to. Something real. Something that no amount of money, no amount of clout, no amount of fame could ever replace. His words. His voice. His truth. Now for those who don't know, and I know most of y'all know, but for the new people on this channel, King Von was one of the most gifted street storytellers to ever touch a microphone. Born and raised in Chicago's Parkway Gardens, better known as O'Block, Von lived a life that most people only see in movies. He lost friends, he lost family members, he faced legal troubles, he survived situations that should have taken him out long before November 2020. But through all of that, he rapped about it. He documented it. He turned his pain into poetry and his trauma into testimony. And millions of people around the world connected with him because of that rawness, that honesty, that vulnerability underneath all the toughness. But here's what a lot of people forget when they talk about King Von the rapper, King Von the street legend. Von was also a father. A real one. He had children who needed him, who loved him, who were growing up watching their dad become one of the biggest names in hip-hop. And his son, Dayvon Jr., named after Von himself, was one of those kids. A little boy who carries his father's name, his father's blood, and now allegedly, his father's last private message. So here is where this story begins. According to sources close to the situation, and we are talking people who are actually in Von's inner circle, not random internet people, not blog accounts with no credibility, but people who were genuinely around him in his final months. Von had apparently been going through something internally in the months leading up to his death. Now on the surface, everything looked good. The music was popping. Welcome to O'Block had just dropped. He was doing shows, he was getting bigger features, the Lil Durk brotherhood was strong, and publicly, Von seemed like he was on top of the world. But behind closed doors, according to these sources, Von was reflecting heavily. He was thinking about legacy. He was thinking about what happens to the people he loves if the worst happens. Now let me be clear, this was not Von being weak. This was not Von being paranoid in some dramatic way. This was a grown man, a street dude who had seen enough death and loss to know that life is not promised, who was quietly making sure that the people he cared about most would be okay. And allegedly, one of the things he did during this period was record a private message. A voice message. Some sources are saying it was actually recorded on video. Others are saying it was audio only. But either way, the details that have been coming out about what was in that message, that is what has the internet completely divided right now. The message was allegedly recorded sometime in the summer of 2020. Think about that. Just a few months before he was taken from us. And the people who have supposedly been made aware of its existence are saying that Von recorded it specifically for Dayvon Jr., with the intention that it would be given to his son when he got older. Not immediately. Not as a child. But when Dayvon Jr. was old enough to truly understand the weight of what his father was saying. Now I want you to sit with that for a second. Because that tells you everything about Vaughn's mindset in those final months. He was not recording that message because he thought he was about to die tomorrow. He was recording it because he understood that in the world he came from, in the life he was living, certainty was a luxury that not everyone gets to have. And as a father, as a man who loved his son deeply, he wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, Dayvon Jr. would one day be able to hear his father's voice, hear his father's heart, and know exactly how Vaughn felt about him. And allegedly, the contents of that message go so much deeper than just "I love you, son." According to the sources that have been speaking on this, Vaughn got into things that he never publicly talked about. Things about his childhood. Things about the mistakes he made. Things about what he wished he had done differently. And things about what he wanted Dayvon Jr. to understand about the world, about manhood, about the streets, about God, about family. Real talk. Raw talk. The kind of conversation that a father has with a son that the world is never supposed to hear. But here is where the drama starts. Here is where things get complicated. Because allegedly, not everyone in Vaughn's circle and family is on the same page about this message. Word started getting out, and when I say getting out, I mean within the family and inner circle, not publicly, that this message existed. And that is when the tension started to build. Because suddenly, there were questions. Who has it? Who is responsible for making sure Dayvon Jr. gets it? When should it be shared with him? And most importantly, should any part of it ever be made public? Now y'all know how these situations go in the entertainment world, and especially in hip-hop culture. When a legend passes away, their estate, their family, their label, their close friends, everybody starts to have opinions. Everybody thinks they know what is best. And love can get real complicated when it is mixed up with grief and money and legacy and public image. And according to sources, that is exactly what started happening around this message. People started taking sides. People started disagreeing about what the right thing to do was. And what started as a private family matter allegedly started to become something much bigger, much messier, and much more emotional than anyone originally anticipated. Fans, of course, knew nothing about any of this. On the surface, the tributes continued. The music was still being played millions of times a day. Vaughn's legacy was growing, as it continues to grow to this day. His mother, his siblings, his team, everyone was publicly holding it together and honoring his memory. But behind the scenes, according to what is being reported, there were real conversations happening about this message and what it meant and who had the right to control it. And those conversations were not always peaceful. Emotions ran high. Old wounds got reopened. And the people who loved Vaughn the most found themselves in the middle of a situation that none of them were prepared for. Now we are going to get into all of that. We are going to talk about what allegedly happened when word of this message started spreading within the circle. We are going to talk about the different sides of this story. We are going to talk about what sources are saying Vaughn actually revealed in this message. Because what he said, y'all, what he reportedly said is something that will genuinely stop you in your tracks. And we are going to talk about what this means for Dayvon Jr. as he grows up carrying the weight of being King Vaughn's son in a world that is watching his every move. But before we get there, I need y'all to really understand the relationship between Vaughn and his son. Because without that context, none of the rest of this hits the way it should. People who knew Vaughn personally, not the fans, not the internet, but people who actually spent time with him, they consistently talk about how much he loved his kids. How he would light up differently around them. How the tough exterior that he carried in the streets, and even sometimes in interviews, would just melt away when his children were around. This was not a man who was disconnected from fatherhood. This was a man who was deeply connected to it, deeply aware of it, and deeply troubled by the fact that the life he was living could one day leave his children without him. And allegedly, all of that, every bit of that love, that guilt, that hope, that fear, that wisdom, allegedly all of it is sitting inside that message that he recorded for Dayvon Jr. Just waiting for the right moment. Just waiting for a little boy to grow old enough to hold the full weight of his father's words. So when part 2 picks up, we are going inside the circle. We are going to hear about the specific moment when things allegedly boiled over. We are going to get into what sources are claiming was said in heated conversations about who controls this message and whether it should ever be released. And y'all, the names that are being brought into this conversation are going to surprise you. Stay with me. We are just getting started. Alright y'all, we are back and it is about to get real heavy, real fast. If you missed part 1, go back and watch it because without that foundation, what I am about to tell you is going to hit you halfway. But for those who are caught up, buckle in. Because this is where the story goes from emotional to explosive. So we left off talking about how word of this private recorded message from Vaughn to his son Dayvon Jr. allegedly started circulating within the inner circle. And I told you that not everyone was on the same page about what to do with it. Now let me get into exactly what allegedly went down when those disagreements stopped being whispered conversations and started becoming real confrontations. According to sources, the tension around this message came to a head sometime in late 2023. Now think about that timing. We are 3 years after Vaughn's passing. Dayvon Jr. is getting older, and the question of when and how this child gets access to his father's private words becomes more urgent with every passing year. And allegedly, there were people in Vaughn's circle who felt strongly that the message should be kept entirely private, that it should be handled within the immediate family, away from cameras, away from labels, away from the public, full stop. These people felt that what Vaughn recorded was sacred, that it belonged to Dayvon Jr. and Dayvon Jr. alone, and that nobody outside of that direct family connection had any right to even be in the conversation about it. But then, allegedly, there were others. Others who felt differently. And this is where it gets complicated, because these were not bad people with bad intentions. These were people who genuinely believed that sharing some portion of Vaughn's message, or at least acknowledging its existence publicly, would actually benefit his legacy and benefit his son in the long run. Their argument, reportedly, was that Vaughn was a public figure, that his voice and his words had touched millions of people, that honoring him fully meant not hiding the parts of him that showed his depth as a father and as a human being beyond just the music, that Dayvon Jr. would one day grow up in a world where his father's legacy is public property in a sense, and that there was a way to handle this message that was both protective of the child and honoring of the man. Now I am not here to tell you who was right and who was wrong. I am just telling you what allegedly went down. And what allegedly went down was that these two perspectives collided. Hard. And it was not just a calm, rational disagreement. According to what sources are sharing, there were moments where things got deeply personal, where old grievances came out, where people who had been holding in their grief and their frustration since November 2020 finally let it out. And this message, this recorded message from a man who could no longer speak for himself, became the lightning rod for all of it. Reportedly, there was one specific conversation, and I want to be careful here because we are talking about real people and real pain. But reportedly, there was one specific conversation where someone very close to Vaughn, someone from his immediate family, allegedly broke down completely. Not out of anger, but out of grief. Out of the overwhelming weight of being responsible for something so precious and so irreplaceable. This person allegedly said something along the lines of, and I am paraphrasing based on what sources have described, that they could hear Vaughn's voice in their head every single day telling them to protect his children above everything else. And that carrying that responsibility while also navigating all the outside noise and outside opinions was becoming unbearable. And y'all, when I heard that detail, I had to stop for a minute. Because that is not drama. That is humanity. That is what grief actually looks like when it is real and when the stakes are real. And it puts everything else into perspective. These are not just blog characters in a story. These are people who lost someone they genuinely loved and who are now trying to honor him while also being human beings who are hurting. But the story does not stop there. Because according to sources, right around the time these internal tensions were peaking, something else allegedly happened that threw everything into an even more complicated situation. Word allegedly started leaking out beyond the immediate circle. Not to the blogs, not to the public, but to people who were adjacent to Vaughn's world, industry people, people connected to his label situation, people who were involved in managing his posthumous music and legacy. And when those people allegedly became aware that this message existed, suddenly there were new voices in the conversation, new opinions, new interests. And not all of them were purely about protecting Dayvon Jr. Now I am not going to sit here and make allegations about specific individuals in the music industry because that is not what this is about. But I will say this, when you are talking about the posthumous legacy of an artist who continues to generate significant streams, significant revenue, and significant cultural relevance years after his passing, the line between honoring that artist and monetizing that artist can get very blurry very fast. And allegedly, some of the conversations happening around this message started to touch on questions that went beyond the purely emotional and into territory that felt, to some people close to Vaughn, deeply uncomfortable. That is allegedly when things really boiled over. Because the people who were most protective of Vaughn's memory and most protective of Dayvon Jr. allegedly felt that outside interests were starting to creep into something that was never meant for outside interests. And they pushed back. Hard. And the pushback allegedly created fractures. Not just between family and industry, but within the circle itself, as people started taking different positions on how to handle the situation. Fans, meanwhile, were completely unaware of any of this. On social media, the tributes were still flowing. Vaughn's music was still being played constantly. Every year on his birthday, on the anniversary of his passing, the internet would flood with love and respect for his legacy. And Dayvon Jr., still a young child, was being raised largely out of the public eye, which is exactly what those who loved Vaughn most had always wanted for him. But here is the twist that sources are now saying changed the entire dynamic of this situation. Allegedly, and this is the part that has people genuinely shook, allegedly, someone who had direct knowledge of the message's contents described some of what Vaughn said. Not publicly, not to a blog, but within the circle. And what they described allegedly sent shockwaves through everyone who heard it. Because apparently, what Vaughn said in this message was not just emotional. It was prophetic. It was specific. And it was deeply personal in ways that nobody, not even the people closest to him, fully expected. According to this account, Vaughn allegedly spoke in the message about specific things he wanted Dayvon Jr. to avoid. Specific patterns. Specific people. Specific situations. As if he somehow understood, on some level, the kinds of pressures and temptations and dangers that his son would face growing up as the child of someone as well known as King Vaughn. He allegedly spoke about the streets, not in a glorifying way, but in a warning way. In a "this is what it actually costs" way that was completely different from how he rapped about the streets publicly. And allegedly, this is the part that has certain people emotional to the point of tears. Vaughn allegedly talked about God in this message. About faith. About things he had been quietly wrestling with spiritually that he had never fully brought into his public persona. People who have been described what Vaughn reportedly said in the message are saying that it revealed a side of him that even his closest people were not fully aware of. A searching side. A side that was genuinely grappling with big questions about life and death and purpose, and what he owed to his children and to God. Now you can understand why, when descriptions of this content started circulating within the circle, the conversation about what to do with this message became even more intense. Because now it was not just about protecting a private communication. It was about protecting a revelation. About protecting a version of Vaughn that the world had never seen and that certain people felt the world had no right to see without Vaughn himself choosing to share it. And right in the middle of all of this, Dayvon Jr. keeps growing. Keeps getting older. Gets closer and closer to the age where the question of when he hears his father's voice stops being theoretical and starts being immediate. And the people responsible for making that decision are carrying the weight of everything I just described while also trying to protect a child who deserves to know his father, who deserves to hear that voice, who deserves that connection regardless of everything happening around it. We are going to get into what sources are saying is happening right now with this situation. We are going to talk about what allegedly went down most recently, what the current status of this message is, and most importantly, we are going to get into the most specific details that have emerged about what Vaughn actually said. Because y'all, the details that are out here right now are not just sad. They are not just emotional. They will genuinely make you look at King Vaughn differently. They will make you understand him on a level that goes beyond the music. So do not go anywhere. Alright y'all, we are in the final stretch and I promise you everything that I am about to share right now is going to hit you like a freight train. We have been building to this and I am not going to waste your time because the details that sources are now putting out about what King Vaughn allegedly said in that private message for his son Dayvon Jr. These details are something else entirely. So let us get straight into it. We were talking about how descriptions of the message's content had started to circulate within Vaughn's inner circle, and how what people were hearing was reportedly so unexpected, so deep, so different from the public King Vaughn persona, that it changed the entire energy around the conversation about this message. And now, with more time having passed and more sources apparently feeling comfortable enough to speak on what they know, additional details are allegedly coming forward. Here is what we are hearing. According to multiple sources who claim to have been made aware of the message's contents through people directly involved, Vaughn allegedly opened the message by speaking to Dayvon Jr. about his name, about what it means to carry the name Dayvon. He allegedly told his son that the name was not just a name, it was a responsibility. That everywhere Dayvon Jr. went in life, people would know who his father was, would have opinions about who his father was, and that his son had to be strong enough to define himself beyond that. Vaughn allegedly said something to the effect that his son should never let the world's version of his father be more important than his own personal connection to who his father truly was. That the music, the image, the street legend, that was one part of him. But the father speaking in that recording, that was the real him. And that was the version his son deserved to know. Now just take a moment with that. Because that is not a line from a rap song. That is not something crafted for public consumption. That is a father, a young man who was only in his mid-20s, who understood that his public image and his private self were two different things, and who wanted his son to have access to the private self. The real self. The Dayvon behind King Vaughn. Sources are also saying that Vaughn allegedly got into specifics about his own upbringing in this message. About growing up in O-Block. About the things he witnessed as a child that shaped him. About the losses he experienced before he was even old enough to fully process them. And reportedly, Vaughn did not romanticize any of it. He did not make the streets sound cool or inevitable. He allegedly told his son directly, and again I am paraphrasing based on descriptions that sources have shared, that the environment he grew up in was not something he wanted for Dayvon Jr. That survival in that environment came at a cost that he personally paid every single day. That the things he had seen and done and been through were things he carried as burdens, not as badges of honor. And that if there was one thing he wanted his son to take from his father's story, it was the understanding that there was always another path. Always. No matter where you came from. That reportedly is one of the moments in the message that has made people who know about it completely break down. Because anyone who followed Vaughn closely knows how deeply his environment shaped him. Knows that he did not have the luxury of easy choices or safe neighborhoods or guaranteed outcomes. And to hear that even within that context, Vaughn was telling his son to find another way that carries enormous weight. Now here is where the story takes another turn. Because according to sources, there is reportedly a section of the message where Vaughn allegedly talked about specific relationships. Not naming everyone explicitly, but speaking about the importance of knowing who is genuinely in your corner versus who is in your orbit because of what you represent. He allegedly told Dayvon Jr. to pay close attention to how people treat him when he has nothing to offer them. That the people who show up in those moments, those are the real ones. And the people who are only around when the cameras are on or when there is something to gain. His son needed to learn to see through that early, because the world would send him plenty of both. Now when sources describe this part of the message, they say the energy shifts. That Vaughn reportedly got quieter. More deliberate. Like he was choosing every word carefully. And allegedly, this is the section where Vaughn talked about his own failures as a father. Where he acknowledged, to his son directly, that he had not always been there the way he should have been. That the life he was living made presence complicated. That there were moments he missed, moments he was not around for, moments where he chose the street over the home, and that those were choices he did not make lightly, but that he made nonetheless. And he reportedly told Dayvon Jr. that he was sorry for those moments. Not in a general, vague way. Specifically sorry. Specifically acknowledging that his son deserved more consistent access to his father than the circumstances allowed. Y'all. A man who is often depicted purely as a street figure, as a tough guy, as someone who embodied a certain kind of hardness. That same man allegedly sat down privately and recorded an apology to his young son for not being present enough. Think about how much courage that takes. Think about how much love that requires. And think about what it means that this message has been sitting in the dark while the world only gets to see one dimension of who Vaughn was. Sources are also saying, and this is perhaps the most spiritually significant part of what is being described, that Vaughn allegedly ended the message by talking about faith. About prayer. About the fact that in his quietest moments, in the moments when he was alone and the noise of the life stopped for a second, he found himself talking to God. Not in a performative way. Not in a religious way that he ever put on publicly. But in a genuinely private, genuinely searching way. He allegedly told his son that whatever happened in his life, whatever road Dayvon Jr. found himself on, he wanted his son to have that same private relationship with something bigger than himself. That the streets could not save you. That money could not save you. That fame absolutely could not save you. But that faith, real faith, not the kind you perform for other people, but the kind that lives inside you quietly. Allegedly, Vaughn told his son that was the thing that had gotten him through his darkest moments, and that he wanted his son to hold on to it no matter what. Now let us bring this back to the present moment. Because here is where things stand right now according to what sources are saying. The message still exists. It has not been destroyed. It has not been leaked. It has not been turned into content. And the people who are responsible for it are allegedly now in a more stable place regarding what to do with it, meaning the heated internal disagreements that characterized 2023 have allegedly cooled somewhat. Not fully resolved, but cooled. And the prevailing perspective among those closest to the situation is reportedly that Dayvon Jr. will receive this message privately, when those responsible for his upbringing determine he is old enough and ready enough to hold everything in it. There is allegedly no plan to release it publicly. And sources say that is a decision that has been made firmly, with the child's well-being at the absolute center of it. Because at the end of the day, whatever Vaughn said in that message was not said for the world. It was said for his son. And the people protecting it are allegedly committed to honoring that intention above everything else. But here's what sources say has come from all of this internal conversation. There is apparently an increased commitment among those close to the family to make sure that Dayvon Jr. has access to as much of his father's real self as possible as he grows up. Not the legend. Not the album covers and the YouTube videos and the street mythology. But the real man. The father. The Dayvon who sat down and poured his whole heart into a recording that his son was never supposed to need, but that his father made sure would be there just in case. And fans, when pieces of this story started circulating on the blogs and in the comment sections and on social media in recent weeks, fans have been completely undone by it. You go to any post about King Von right now, and the comments are full of people saying that this is exactly why he remains one of the most loved figures in hip-hop even years after his passing. Because even in the things the world cannot fully see, you can feel the love. You can feel the depth. You can feel that this was not just an artist. This was a human being who loved hard and who wanted better for his children than what the world gave him. People in the comments are saying things like Vaughn knew, like he had a feeling, like the fact that he made that recording proves that somewhere in him, he understood that time was not guaranteed and he acted accordingly. Others are saying they wish more people would see this side of the story, not just the music, not just the tragedy of how he died, but the full picture of who he was as a father and as a man who was clearly doing a lot of private growing that the public never got to witness. And Dayvon Jr., that little boy who carries his father's name and his father's face and his father's blood, he is out here growing up in a world that is watching him. A world that loves his father deeply. A world that will have all kinds of things to say about who he should be and what he should represent. And somewhere, waiting for him, is his father's voice. Telling him who he truly is. Telling him he is loved. Telling him he is enough. Telling him to find his own path and hold on to his faith and see through the fake ones and know that the real King Von, the Dayvon, loved him more than any song could ever say. That is the story, y'all. And I needed y'all to have all of it. Now look. I know that was a lot. I know some of you are sitting there right now